My name is Tosti. My occupation is human performance technologist. There are a variety of ways of describing that. It does different depending on which client it is. It could be culture change consultant, it could be organizational consultant, it could be change consultant. But the issue always is, how do I get results working with people and people systems? I first got into HPT many years ago. In fact, in the early days of program instruction. My birthday in the field was August the 1st, 1960, okay? I took my first job. And that job really was involved in writing a program instruction course on basic electricity. Since I happen to have a degree in electrical engineering, it was helpful to do that kind of thing. Those early days were very interesting because it was the beginning of the field. And my influences at that time, I came to work for Lloyd Homme. Lloyd Homme had been part of the original Teaching Machine project and one of the founders of the field. Lloyd went on for many years coming out with many great concepts, many which we still use today in a variety of ways, although maybe his name is not as familiar to people today as it was in the early 60s and 70s. The second, I think, most important influence in my life was Charlie Slack. Dr. Charles Slack was the first partner of Tom Gilbert in his company, but before that, Slack began to use a lot of the HPT techniques in the field. For example, working heavily with juvenile delinquents in New York City, in gangs. One of the first things he did in the second conference of ISBI, he brought a gang leader to address us at the conference, okay? To talk about exactly the power of HPT in a variety of social situations and not just formal learning situations. I've been involved, of course, since I've been around so long, hundreds of applications. Really hundreds of applications of HPT, ranging from focusing on systems, the systems improvement and process improvement, to organizational improvement, cultural improvement, working with 3-year-olds and working with 80-year-olds. At a Job Corps center at one time I ran, and I was working with juvenile delinquents on 14th Street in Washington, D.C., while simultaneously run a project for midshipmen of the Naval Academy. Probably the most memorable event was working with British Airways as a chief consultant of culture change. I was their chief consultant. I went through 5 HR directors and two CEOs during a period of 10 years. What we did, we came into British Airways, and at that time it was government owned. Also, since being government owned, they were nearly bankrupt. The government kept them going, basically. 2 things they cared about that time was airplanes, mainly, and easy jobs, the second thing. What they didn't care about was customers and cost. Now, Maggie Thatcher had made the decision to sell them off and become privatized. So how are they going to survive? Fortunately, they got a CEO in who understood things had to change. We were brought in to say, what can you do about the culture side? How can you get us to think about business in such a way that we think about ourselves as a business, keeping costs under control, and more important than that, focus on the customer and delivering customer value, not just flying airplanes. That was our task. The first people they brought in were some academics who said, this is a very interesting problem. Give us 4 years and we'll have the answer. And the CEO said, we don't have 4 years. Another group has come in which was off-the-shelf consultants. That is, they had the package right here that would solve all British Airways problems. Just implement it. Right here, we guarantee it. And they said, really, where's the evidence for that? And they couldn't provide any, so then they asked us. And we said, we don't have an off-the-shelf answer, but we got some good ideas. Give us a chance to try it out. And they did. They gave us the 2 terminals and the people from the terminals to see if we could make a difference. We did. After a week of training and development with those people, they had a real culture change. In fact, the London Times accused us of American brainwashing. But it worked. It worked so well that the CEO said, take my whole company. And for the next 4 years, we really worked with managers at all levels of the organization in recreating what we needed to have as a new company, focus on the customer. We also worked heavily with the supervisors in the areas of high customer contact, because the reality is you do not get a culture change unless you get the supervisors on board with you. The old phrase is really accurate. Generals make the decision, but the sergeants run the army, okay? And that's very true of a culture change as well. If you don't get the people down to the lowest level saying, we got to make a difference here. The process we used was basically HPT process. We started with the results, and we asked people what they needed to do to obtain those results. The results we started with was good customer service. And then we asked, what do you have to do to make it happen? And then we asked, how well are we doing on it? And then we gave them feedback on how well they were doing on it. Individuals and groups begin to get feedback to the extent which they're doing it. The secret to culture change is very simple. It is not individual incentives, it is group incentives. Everybody wants to be part of a team that wins and does not go down in defeat. What we do in culture change is align those kinds of things on a behavioral basis, performance practices basis, to say this is what we need to do to be a winning community, to survive and thrive and grow. And then great things happen. It did happen with British Airways. In 4 years after we started working with them, when they had gone privatized, they had gone from near bankruptcy to the most profitable airline in the world, and 5 times larger. In 10 years, they were 5 times larger than their competitors were when they first started the project. Those are the kinds of things that can be done in the field, and it's very, very exciting. There are many, many terms in HPT, and some of them are used well and some of them are used badly. The one which has always been my favorite to look at is the term feedback. Feedback may be one of the most important concepts we have. Feedback technology may be as important as learning, as instructional technology, although we've neglected it to a certain extent. I define feedback as information which will enable and encourage people to change their behavior. Now, given that definition, you'd think that would be easy. In fact, unfortunately, most feedback systems do exactly the opposite. They neither encourage nor enable people to easily change their behavior. Performance appraisals are terrible overloads. 360 feedback gives you 100 items that you can't possibly change, bunched all together. In other words, most feedback systems and most feedback rules are really contrary to the understanding and basic nature of what feedback is all about. That is, to encourage and enable people to change their behavior. I always say, if you think you have the right to give feedback, you have the obligation to make sure it's useful in some way. So anyway, those are my issues and some of the things I've done over the years.